we're gonna have a few announcements. It's gonna be pretty short, and then we're gonna get into our presentation today. Just so we want to update y'all on our recent project that we just finished up. This was in collaboration with Sarah Simpson and her business called Color Space. She is an urban architect that I had mentioned at last meeting. She was one of our former presenters last semester. Awesome person. We got to meet her coworker as well too. And then me and Kiana were helping out and putting all the materials that the officers had donated, and some of y'all as well too have donated to this project. The project was called a Critter Stack, and it was part of this big event in the Labor Johnson Wildflower Center called Fortlandia. So the idea of the event was to, I guess, partner up with local businesses around the San Marcos and Austin area and invite them to the botanical garden to see if they could come up with a design that imitates a fort and can also be like some type of playground for kids as well. So the idea that Sarah Simpson had was to make a critter stack. If you don't know what a critter stack is, it's an artificial type of habitat that is utilized by all different sorts of wildlife. Kind of like really just a big brush pile, but in a neat, organized manner. And you have invertebrates, birds, herps going in there and utilizing that space. So she had that vision in mind, and we were making it basically come true. We were partner up with a steel framework company in town as well too. So they created this main steel frame that you see here and all the beautiful colors that are just popping out at you. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the officers and some of y'all actually too donated all these materials along with Sarah Simpson and her husband, collecting all the biodegradable and organic material that is used for the building process. And here's like a side view of the fort. So it looks like they're gonna finish up on the sides, and we're gonna cover these areas with wood slats and then make like little stepping stairs or some type of climbing section for the kids. And then just, there is like a little portal that they will start, they'll be crawling under too, and just to get a better look of like how all the materials are coming together and just having fun. There will be workers along like every morning, just making sure that there's no like rattlesnakes or any type of like maybe little critters that might harm the kids. So yeah, it's almost done. Maybe like 95% is complete. So the event actually takes place from October 2nd of this year to January 30th of next year. So if you're interested in checking out what we actually helped create, just all you have to do is just pay like a $11 entrance fee to the LBJ Wildflower Center, and you could definitely just check out all the forts that have been constructed this semester. Anything to add on this that I can remember?
So opening night is October 2nd, but it stays open until January 30th, so you can go and check it out. We're also gonna have a plaque with like the Wildlife Society's name on it and everyone who donated and stuff like that. So, and there's I think 6 more forts that other people throughout the city have built as well. So it's going to be a pretty cool thing to just go and check out. And it's at the Wildflower Center, so it's a nice place to be regardless.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting designs, and we've gotten some really good comments from the actual like officials and people that work at the Wildflower Center, just because it goes with the theme of what they're all about, trying to be sustainable, but also support and bring some type of wildlife habitat to any type of critters that are around the area. Also, we just posted a job announcement at the OBJ Wildflower Center, and it's a part-time position. I think they're paying like $15 or something, and they're taking applications right now, and it's actually for this event. And it's really just to like monitor the forts, clean them up, make sure that they're all nice and tidy for everyone and the guests to enjoy and to interact with. So if you're looking for a job and you want to enjoy really nice scenery like almost every day, check out that job post that we posted on Canvas. So we have our t-shirt and sticker designs up and ready. And it looks like we're gonna be doing a poll on GroupMe, but we're gonna show y'all the designs that we came up with.
So the poll is open right now. So as soon as I can figure out how to get it pulled up, we will do that.
We can stop sharing. Share screen.
I think you might have to click on it first. Oh,
That.
yeah. There we go. And close. Yeah. Okay, so these are the new designs. There's 4 t-shirt designs. You can vote for one, or you can vote for all of them, or you can vote for 2, however many you want. And then these are the 2 sticker designs. Vote for one or both of them, whichever one you want to actually be produced and buy. So the poll's open right now on GroupMe. Go vote for your favorite one. And based on the votes, that's what we'll be actually creating.
Yeah,
And I'm going to post this on GroupMe too, just in case anybody needs it.
Yeah, these designs on the left were created by Kiana, and then these t-shirt designs in the middle were created by our social media coordinator, Courtney. And then Kiana created those stickers while getting all of our input as well too from the officer group. So really neat stuff. Wish I could buy them all.
Okay, we can give y'all a minute to vote, but I'll post this on the GroupMe too, and the poll is gonna stay open until tomorrow, so you have time.
All right, exit out. All right, and just a quick overview of our events for September. Not gonna really go into October yet, it's a little too early, but we do have stuff open for the month of October. But we're in our second meeting right now. This weekend coming up, we do have a hike / event / like project event with Dr. Proppe, and it'll be at the Wild Basin Preserve in Austin, Texas. So if you haven't yet got an announcement about it or like a little reminder, I'll send that out probably by tomorrow. And it looks like there's 13 people signed up. So if you're still going to the event, look out for that announcement, and it's going to give you like a brief overview of what to expect for Saturday. And it's from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Sounds pretty fun. Looks like we're gonna have at least an hour and a half of hiking, and then there'll be either a moderate to strenuous work project. And we're definitely gonna be learning a lot from Dr. Proppe while being on the preserve, and then enjoying all the natural scenery that the preserve has to offer. This Friday, we do have another specimen room inventory check in Supple 136. Kate is going to be leading that since I won't be in town. She has the key and everything. That is starting from 9 a.m. to 1:30. But if you can't be there the whole time, maybe like 30 minutes to an hour, definitely still show up. Like, we definitely need all the help that we can get. She's trained on how to do the inventory check, and she'll show you step by step on how to complete those inventory checks. But yeah, make sure to sign up. I think there's like 4 spots available. So first come, first serve. There's field guides as well too for reference if you're having trouble identifying some of these species. If you have any type of like wildlife apps, birding apps, those are really handy. They come in really good use. And then nothing scheduled for the following week or for next week until September 29th, which will be our 3rd meeting. And real quick, we have some announcements from Kate.
Okay, so I have a volunteer volunteer opportunity for you guys. Danielle over here is part of the Urban Wildlife Information Network, and she needs help tagging game camera photos. So what you would be doing if you're interested is you'll get sent a folder full of, she'll tell you how to sign up and everything, but you'll get sent a folder full of pictures of wildlife, and you'll just go through and tag them like, this is a deer, this is a raccoon, etc. And anything notable about it. It's something you can do remotely. It's a pretty fun way to pass the time, and it's not super time consuming, and you can do as much or as little as it works for your schedule. So if you're interested in that, I'll pass around a sign up sheet to get your info to give to her. And if you have any questions about it, you can also talk to her after the meeting, so she can give you more information about it. So I will start passing this.
Sweet. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it. And then we're gonna have Dr. Walter with his announcements. Yes. People in Zoom world, we're gonna disconnect real quick, but we'll reconnect you, and I'll send you the information that Dr. Walter has after this meeting. What do you need? You need this?
I think it's,
Oh, it's this one.
let's get that one. It was up there.
Yeah. I can move this over here. No, maybe they can see it. Maybe y'all can see his presentation.
Yeah. Ready, folks? I decided school is just too hard sometimes, so you need something to look forward to in life, okay? So I have two opportunities for you. I'm going to tell you about one of them today. These are opportunities that I'm involved with for next summer. They're internships, basically. One is in Costa Rica. I'm not going to talk about that one today because it doesn't open for several months from now, so I can tell you about it later. But the one I will tell you about is the one in Ecuador. So I'm just going to go a relatively short presentation, but then I have a little flyer you can grab that talks about it, and then an informational sheet. Okay, so you can grab that right when I'm done talking, so you have it, because the deadline is kind of coming up pretty quick. Ecuador. So this is where I worked several years ago as part on doing research after I graduated my PhD, and I've continued with my collaborators there. And we got a new grant to support students doing the research down there. So I work here, right? I introduced myself last time. And so this money comes from the National Science Foundation. So we have a grant. And the name, you should take notes too. In case, you know, in case there's any pertinent details or deadlines you want to keep track of. And the name of the program is the International Research Experience for Students. So we call it IRIS. Okay. And so the next slide is going to say all students are eligible, but it really should say unless you graduate in like this December or May, then you're ineligible. But a lot of you I know are on the younger side of your college career. But it's for everyone in this room, unless you're graduating next May or before. I know. But then I also mentioned in all the programs I run during the summers, we highly encourage underrepresented students to apply for these programs, right? And then here's my note. For you to do this, you do have to be enrolled in really the spring of next year and then also the fall of next year, because it's a full year deal, okay? And again, this is money that we have through the university here from this grant. So the only people applying to the money that I have is people here on Texas State. So that's your competition. People in this room, people in my courses, other students on campus, okay? So it's a little bit of a bigger picture in that here at Texas State, I am just accepting 2 undergraduate students, okay? So that's the student cohort from here. But then also this grant is in collaboration with Tulane University over New Orleans. That's where I did my postdoc. So they're also going to accept 2 undergrads and 1 graduate student. And then our other collaborator is with a woman at Ohio State. And so she's also going to accept 2 undergraduates and 1 graduate student. So think about this as a bigger picture. So there will be 8 students in this IRIS cohort. So you'd be one of the IRIS fellows for this next year. So it's an opportunity for lots of things, but also to collaborate with people from different universities and start getting more connections and seeing how other institutions run, okay? And the general, all of us do different things. I have a certain line of research I do, as do the other 2 professors. And so overall, it's just a really, really general theme that we have of doing any conservation-oriented project that's good really for the whole environment, for the plants, for the wildlife, but also the people. The woman we have that works at Ohio State, she's really an anthropologist. So she's going to work on the people side of the project. I will work on the wildlife side of the project. So let's see. So we have 8 students you work with in total. You have 3 professors. And then also your support network will be through an NGO. It's a non-governmental organization that is in Ecuador. I was just at this field station about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. I went to check it out for the first time. It's a new station. It's a new reserve. They have a bunch of rainforest next to it. So it's the Fundación para la Conservación de los Andes Tropicales. And we just call it FCAT. That's the acronym, right? So that's what FCAT is. And so this is an NGO I worked with, I don't know, like 6, 7 years ago when I was working down there. And most of them are still there. So this is the team of Ecuadorians that work with this, this NGO. And they are going to be part of your support network as well, right? So it's not just you doing this little project. You have all kinds of people helping with this project. How much do you think this is going to cost you to participate? Are y'all broke? It's free. Everything's paid for. We fly down there, we give you food, we give you a place to live, so it's all free, right? So that's good news. And we pay you on top of it. So we give you some thousands of dollars. So no, this is not a course. It's not a course, right? You don't get course credit for it. It's an opportunity, it's an internship. This is how you gain experience in life. And that's one of the benefits of being part of a society like this, is we hear about things. I don't tell people in the hallway, I tell people that show up for things like this. And so the short story is, it's kind of it's really a year-long process. And so you being from here, you would be under my mentorship. And of course, the rest of the IRIS team and that NGO. So it's 3 parts. In the spring, we're here on campus, right? I'm here, you're here. And that's when we're just getting ready to go down to Ecuador. So you're going to meet with me on a weekly basis. Both students will. And then once a month, we'll meet with the larger cohort of students at those 2 other universities through a Zoom meeting, because we're in different places, just to get to know them, start building a network, and then we'll work on like a project proposal, get ready for the trip, etc. And then from summertime, that's when we go to Ecuador. I fly down there with the 2 students from here. You meet the cohort, we get all set up, I get you oriented, and then you continue to conduct your research project, again, a lot with the support of the people at that station, at the FCAT station. Okay, let's see, I think I'm gonna skip ahead to a slide that I deleted. So just so you know, it's most likely, it's highly likely that the projects that come out of here that through me will be with birds. And why do you think that is? That's my answer. It's because they're awesome. That is my answer. Okay, you knew that. Yeah. Anyway, so just so you know, if you're like really into plants or something, I don't know if you'd be interested, because we're definitely working with birds. That's kind of my specialty. And it's because they're awesome. That's a real bird. It's a royal flycatcher. Let's see, so that's it. And then you're done. Summertime's over. And then you come back in the fall and you have a bunch of data, et cetera. So that's when you're going to analyze the data, again, with my help and the help of the team. And then write up a research manuscript. That's what you do in science. And then we'll have some sort of research symposium at which you present your research. Okay. So again, it's a full year thing. That's pretty much it. So I would tell you applications are due in a month from today, kind of soon. So if you're interested, I would get on top of it now. But still you have some time. And then after you, all these pictures are from there, by the way, right? After that, about a month after that is by when I will have my selections made. Right? So you'll know this fall whether you're going there next summer. And 2 more slides. I just gave you an overview right now, but I'm sure people have questions. So I am holding an informational session a week from today, basically right here, right now, this room. And that's just a time you can ask me all the questions you want. I can tell you more information. It's just a very informal conversation about it for you to learn more about the program. Okay, so write that down. I don't know if that's listed anywhere else. Yeah, I guess it's listed on here too, on the back. And then finally, it's also listed in this little handout I have for you, but for you to apply, this explains what you have to do to apply, but there's also some questions you have to answer, and the only way to get those questions is to email. And then I'm just gonna send you a document. So that's my main work email, really. So if you wanna write that down, that's my, like school email address that I use for school functions. So you just need to write me a short email, and then this is kind of important to help me keep track. In your subject line, just say interest in IRIS or the IRIS program. Okay, and then I'm just gonna say, okay, I'm gonna reply and send you a document, a Word document with the questions. Those are your application questions that you include as part of your package. Okay, okay, we have 30 seconds for questions. Any questions in 30 seconds before we switch to our guest speaker? Okay, 1 question, 2 questions, that's it. And then I'm gonna cut it off because we can talk next week on later.
So I was just saying, or I was just wondering, there's gonna be other schools going, but their focus is on something else. So are we able to like talk to them about what they're doing or collaborate with them?
Oh, absolutely, that's the whole idea. This is an interdisciplinary, multi-institutional, international project. So we work with wildlife, likely birds. The Tulane folks will probably work with vegetation plants in that regard. And then the Ohio State folks will work with literally people. They're going to go to people's houses and talk about how their land use, how many trees they cut down, how much shade there is, how that affects the health.
So like besides me just talking to them, would I be able to go like with them?
You're going to see them every single day. You're going to live with them. All of them. This whole thing is like you live at this field station. Yeah, so you're there. This whole thing is about collaboration. So yes, yes, yes. We can discuss more, but that's the general answer. Okay, then 1 more question?
Will this affect graduating?
In what way? What do you mean?
And like any time, like
No, I shouldn't get in your way. This is like a 1-hour meeting a week. It's not going to interfere with your courses or anything. We'll schedule around your courses. Yeah, it doesn't mess up your graduation. It messes up your summer plans because you got to be gone. Okay, so that's pretty much it. So I would recommend, I'm gonna scoot out of here right when Darren's done because I need to ride my bicycle to someplace. So if you're interested, ask your neighbors, just come up and get one of these right now so you have one, because I'm gonna leave shortly after our guest speaker's done. So grab some for your neighbors if they want, okay? Okay, thanks folks. We caught it in this.
Yes, I know. I really do actually.
Yeah, you guys actually did it. Okay, I'll see you next week if you want to go to that thing.
Hope y'all got that. If y'all didn't, I'll be sending the flyer, like a PDF version to y'all as well.
Yeah, on the chat, they're saying on the Zoom chat, if there's an online signage.
For what? No, I'm taking pictures. Yeah, I have everyone on here. All right, guys. Thank you, Dr. Walter. Huh? Alrighty, and I would like to introduce our new speaker to the Wallace Society, Dr. Darren Proppe, and I'll be starting with a brief introduction. So his talk is on creating connections, research, and conservation at the Wild Basin Creative Research Center. The United States possesses a robust community of wildlife and ecological management programs and professionals and has a strong history of academic output related to ecology and conservation. The Wild Basin Creative Research Center sits within both spheres, being owned and operated by St. Edward's University and also a member of the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve, which is a collaborative of properties and land managers designed to protect native and endangered species. Dr. Darren Proppe, the research director at the Wild Basin Creative Research Center, will describe current research taking place at the station and discuss how research at a primarily undergraduate university can be integrated into management objectives. Further, he will describe his own research program, which aims to strengthen songbird conservation and management through a tighter inclusion of concepts from animal behavior. Without further ado, let's give it a hand for Dr. Darren Proppe. This is going on here, right?
There it is. All right. Well, thank you all very much for having me here tonight. If you can't hear me, let me know. All right. I kind of tend to start talking quiet. I don't have a super strong voice. So in the back, please feel free. Hey, say that again. And if at any point in time you have questions, want to stop, I'm willing to do so. I'm happy to chat, happy to answer questions as we go. All right. And of course, I'll take questions at the end as well if there are more then. So I'll go ahead and get started. I entitled this Creating Connections, Research and Conservation at the Wild Basin Creative Research Center. So I'm kind of breaking this into 4 different areas or topics for this talk tonight. The first one is just to introduce you to the Wild Basin Creative Research Center. All right, so what the heck is that place? Well, has anyone been there? Okay, a couple of you have been there, but most of you have not. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it, and maybe you'll come on Saturday and actually get to see it for yourself. Second, I'll tell you about the research director role. So that's what I do there. So I'm going to tell you about the role, but also a little bit about sort of my history as I've sort of developed into my career, because I know many of you are looking at careers in wildlife. And so just give you one trajectory to add to the mix there. And because I'm a research director, I'm going to talk about research. Surprise, surprise. So I'm going to talk about current research at the center, and then a little bit about some other research that I've been working on for a number of years. So that's sort of the breakdown of what it's going to look like tonight. Sound good? All right. Here we go. The Wild Basin Creative Research Center. So I can't say this is the view from my window, but it's pretty close. So I got a pretty nice office out there. So Wild Basin is a natural area in Austin, Texas. It is open to the public 7 days a week, Monday through Friday. If you get done with class early and you need to just get out and clear your head, go for a hike, come out. Dawn to dusk, you can just walk in. Saturday and Sunday gets kind of busy, so we started a reservation system, which is a little bit of a pain, I know. But on the other hand, we got to keep the numbers down a little bit as well. So if you come out on the weekends, you need to get a reservation. But you can check out our website, just Google Wild Basin, and you'll find that for reservations. So this is a map. I'm going to take this off if that's okay with you guys, because I feel like I'm not projecting well. There, that sounds a little better to me. All right, so this is a map of Austin area. So here's sort of downtown Austin. We're associated with St. Edward's University, which is right here. And then this is Wild Basin over here. So you can see that we are, I would say, on the edge of Austin to some extent. But if you know Austin, like most of this area, it's growing like crazy. So we are less and less on the edge as time goes by. So there's an aerial image of Wild Basin. The arrow points to the natural area. What you can see is that there is a highway, Highway 360, that goes along one side of Wild Basin. On the other side, you can see there's quite a bit of development. It's fairly low density development. It's a very wealthy area of Austin. And so a lot of these homes have fairly large tracts of land, but nonetheless, we have a fairly contained by development. So we're becoming a little bit more of an urban island. So this is actually the outline of Wild Basin right here. And in the middle, I've got the trails. So the orange dotted things are the trails, about 2.5 miles of trails. And so again, like I said, that's open to the public. So come hike those trails sometime. It was founded in 1976. That was before my time with Wild Basin, but apparently it was a bit of an ordeal. It took quite a bit of work to put this land aside for preservation rather than development. But there are many women who fought for it especially, and were able to get this land put aside. So it's become a real gem in the Austin area. It houses some pretty cool things. So golden-cheeked warblers. I don't know if I heard some excitement about birds, so that makes me happy. So maybe some of you know golden-cheeked warblers, endangered species that we have here in Central Texas. They do nest on site. We had 3 of them last year. The black-hat vireo we have not had a nest on site for a long time, but last year we had one that stayed for about 2 weeks, which hadn't happened for a while. So we'll see if they show up more, but it certainly used to have more black-hat vireos. Rare and endangered plants as well. So this is the shooting star. And then it's also just an interesting area to look at a lot of wildlife movement. So we have a lot of things like coyotes, lots of foxes. I know y'all were talking about, I think you're talking about UN, the International or the Urban Wildlife Informational Network. We have a few cameras for UN at Wild Basin. And on one of them, we recently saw an otter, which was really, really unexpected and cool. So if you volunteer for that project, you get to see cool stuff that most people don't. So if you were to look at the Wild Basin outline and you look at that sort of space, that area of land that was on the map, it's a little bit bigger than just Wild Basin. That's because the city of Austin bought another preserve right next door. It's called the Vireo Preserve. And so that was, I would say, annexed or was created in 1980. And so together it's 432 acres, although they're managed by different entities, but it's contiguous natural space for wildlife. We also joined in 1996 the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve. So this is a much larger preserve. It's a lot of different scattered properties throughout Travis County surrounding Austin. And it was really designated to preserve habitat for golden-cheeked warblers and black-hat vireos. It's been relatively successful as far as the number of properties and putting aside quite a few different landscapes for wildlife in general. In 2009, Wild Basin became part of St. Edward's University. So prior to that, it was run by an independent organization that ran the place, but then it joined, sometimes you start tripping over words, let's get try it again. Then they joined St. Edward's University in 2009. So here's the mission of Wild Basin. And I should say Wild Basin Creative Research Center. So when I have Wild Basin CRC, that stands for Creative Research Center, because it is maintained partially by St. Edward's University. The center is St. Edward's, and about 1/3 of the property, but then 2/3 of the property is maintained by Travis County. So it's a co-managed. So talk about making connections, sort of being in the middle. You already start to see where we're sitting in a couple of spheres as far as this goes. But here's our Wild Basin mission: to protect and maintain the preserve's urban wilderness and to promote the importance of environmental education, research, conservation, and preservation. So I'm mostly going to talk about research tonight because that's what I do on the preserve. But we have an education director, we have a land manager, and there's lots of other things going on as well. So it's a very diverse place as far as events and what kind of activities are taking place on the preserve. So that's Wild Basin. Any questions? You want to come see it now? Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about my role, the research director role, and again, a little bit about my history as well. So I went to Texas A&M as an undergraduate. I don't know if I'm gonna hear any boos or whoops in here, but that's where I went a number of years ago. I got a degree in wildlife and fishery sciences, which is now, I think, all reorganized and reshuffled. And anyways, that's where I got started. I was into marine biology when I was an undergrad. I was a scuba instructor. I was fortunate enough to do some research on the Flower Gardens banks. Anyone been there? They're about 100 miles off the Texas coast. If you ever get a chance, they're awesome, beautiful place to go. See lots of sea creatures, lots of sharks, lots of corals. So it was a great position for me to have as an undergraduate. I worked as a scuba instructor, got to work, actually taught lessons in Lake Travis for several years. Up in Austin, also at Canyon Lake, not too far from here, and then in the British Virgin Islands, which was just a little bit cooler than Canyon Lake sometimes. You know. So I started out with this goal of marine biology, really focused on coral and coral reef systems, which is really cool. And then I graduated from Texas A&M, and I got the job that everybody always wants to get. I was grading SAT tests for high school students, which I know that's always the goal. So I was pretty excited about it. But after a few months of doing that, I was talking about how I was really interested in wildlife, and somebody like 3 rows back pipes up and says, "Hey, have you ever heard of a golden-cheeked warbler?" And at the time I was like, "No, I really hadn't." But I knew that was a bird, and so I thought, "Hey, yes, let's do it." They said, "Well, why don't you come with us and count golden-cheeked warblers at Camp Bolus near San Antonio in the summertime." I did, and I've never stopped counting birds ever since. So that was a major turnaround point for me. Not that I don't think marine biology is great, but you know, one thing you do find is sometimes opportunities shift. Sometimes you shift in your interest and your thinking. And I just encourage you to let yourself do that. You know, follow that path that opens for you. And this is one that opens for me. So after getting super into birds, I decided to go get a master's degree, went to Eastern Kentucky University, and I studied grasshopper sparrows, the grassland birds out there, and I looked at their song system. So basically, how do they sing in relation to the breeding cycle? Went and got a PhD at the University of Alberta, so I went up to Canada, I should say, and got my PhD, and studied black-capped chickadees among other birds, and I started to look at the effects of noise, anthropogenic human-produced noise, on songbird behavior and populations. So I really got into the birds, and then after that, just a little bit on sort of the trajectory career-wise, I went and taught. I started off at a tiny university in North Carolina in Asheville called Moncrief College. It's about 400 students, a tiny little place. And it was all teaching there. They had a great student body. I was there for a couple of years. I decided I wanted to engage a little bit more deeply into research. I went to a different university, Calvin University, which is in Grand Rapids, Michigan, much colder than here. But a cool place nonetheless. And I was there for 8 years as faculty as well. Both of these were primarily undergraduate institutions. So most of my work was with undergraduates, doing both teaching and research. And then about 2 years ago, I decided I was ready to do something a little different, come back to Texas. I've been about 20 years away, and I was excited to be back in the hill country. And I took a job at the Wild Basin, well, what I'm talking about now, at St. Edward's or Wild Basin, as staff, as a research director. And so it was interesting transitioning from faculty to a staff position. And so that's something certainly if you guys have questions about afterwards or want to talk to me about, like what is it like to be faculty versus staff and working at undergraduate institutions, I'm happy to answer those kinds of things because there's a number of transitions there. I can say as faculty, one thing is that you can tell me if you disagree with me, but as my experience as faculty, you have a little more freedom as far as like, you don't have to be there 8 to 5 necessarily, you just have to get everything done, right? On the flip side of it, the stuff that you have to get done is a lot, right? So there's tugs and pulls of either one. It's sort of something to think about. And again, I'm happy to talk to you about different roles in those kinds of, in this field. So Wild Basin, the research director role, these are kind of the ideas that I set up. All right, so these are the things that I'm setting out to do here at Wild Basin. I've been here, I said 2 years, but it's actually like 1 year and 8 months. So I'm still pretty new to the position. So one of the things, create meaningful research opportunities for St. Edward's students and faculty through research conducted at Wild Basin and in the broader Balcones Canyonlands Preserves, where we're part of that bigger preserve. So students and faculty, that's one of my big roles, working a lot with students and faculty. Let's get you guys out here. Let's get some research going. Can we help you get some money? Can we help you make a plan? How do we get things happening out of Wild Basin? Increase student preparation for jobs in graduate school in ecological, environmental, and sustainability related fields. So doing research, getting on the ground is a good way to help get you prepared for a job. Another thing we have going for us, we work with the city of Austin, we work with Travis County, we work with other universities. So it's a great way to meet people, right? Sometimes you start to meet people that eventually might be employers in your field. My third goal, enhance the reputation of St. Edward's University by implementing and disseminating high quality research outputs. I really want us to do really good research. And I want to be able to present that research, much like you guys are doing here, like some of those opportunities you're talking about, so that we can really show that we're doing some good stuff there. Contribute to Central Texas ecological management objectives via rigorous applied research. So I like applied research, stuff that actually contributes to management goals. And again, where we are, that works pretty well because management is happening all around us and we can ask them, what is it that we need to do? And often City of Austin, they'll come in, they'll tell me, here's some of our priorities. And then lastly, build collaborative research endeavors with partner institutions and agencies that enhance regional research efforts and scientific output, making those connections, right? So a lot of universities, we got state agencies, local agencies, NGOs, how do we work together? That's one of the things I'm looking at. So this is just a short list of groups that are in the area. It really is a short list. It's actually a lot bigger than this as far as different groups that are involved in research or could be involved in research. So as far as the research goes at Wild Basin, we have sort of three different big pieces. One is creative research. The name is the Creative Research Center. And the idea behind creative research is it doesn't have to be just biology or just wildlife. They're open to arts. They're open to people that come out there to write. They're open to people that come out there to create a business plan. We can always use that, right? How are we going to make money and how do we stay open, that kind of stuff. If you're going to invent or you're going to build and market some kind of equipment. So we try to be pretty broad as far as what we'll do out at Wild Basin. I'm particularly interested in monitoring management. So, are there long-term things that we can do to monitor the habitats that we have at Wild Basin, especially as it's changing? And then hypothesis-driven research is important as well, right? So the idea that you got a question, you're trying to answer that question. So from here, I'm going to go into part 3, current research at the center. Any questions so far? All right. So what are we doing at Wild Basin right now? Now remember, I've been there for 18 months, was it? 12 plus 8, 20 months? Okay. So a lot of this is just getting off the ground, right? So don't judge me too quick here, but here's what we're doing. We have 15 long-term ecological research locations or sites within the preserve. These were set up before I came, I think 2016, but then they were kind of abandoned for several years. So I've sort of re-upped these and said, hey, we've got these different locations spread across the preserve. Let's find out what's happening at these locations, and let's do it over and over again so we can see how things change over time. That's long-term ecological research or monitoring. So there, that map has those 15 different locations, all those pins that you see on that map. So one of the first things I did was start a project called Wild Basin Now. And the idea behind that was, what is here now? Let's inventory Wild Basin. So we got a bunch of students, undergraduate students from St. Edward's, and we went out and started counting, measuring, surveying. This is part of the group right there. We did vegetation surveys. Have any of you done vegetation surveys? Okay, some of you have done vegetation. Did you like veg surveys? They're kind of hard in Central Texas, right? There's a lot of things that want to poke you and whatnot, but nonetheless, they did a great job. And knowing how to do veg surveys is actually pretty foundational for a lot of studies you'll do in wildlife. So it's a really good skill to have. So we did veg, we did arthropods, we did birds, and we did mammals at these 15 points. We basically laid now this baseline. We hope to do it in maybe 5 years or so again and see, hey, are things changing? There's another long-term project that's been going on longer than that because it's been started and run by our director, Barbara Dugalby, and that is a camera tracking project. So the UN cameras are part of this. But there's 2 sets of cameras at Wild Basin that are capturing wildlife, among other things. And one of them is along our trail system. So we've got, I can't actually remember the number of cameras, we can see them all dotted here along the trails. They're capturing cool things like, of course, wildlife use of the trails because they're using these as corridors, but also human use of the trails, right? And they can start to do comparisons. Another set is on the perimeter, which you see here. So this is our border. And one kind of interesting thing about Wild Basin's perimeter is this borders a neighborhood, that borders Vireo Preserve, so it's another preserve, right? So we start to look at wildlife movement through a neighborhood versus through another preserve. Do they differ? Early data has suggested there's not a whole lot of difference here, which is a good sign. The neighborhood is an extension of our preserve, but we continue to work on that. Another thing that's kind of cool, since we've been doing this for a while, actually, I don't know if I want to start this with it's kind of cool. COVID is not kind of cool at all cool. But what's interesting about COVID was we shut down for a period of time like most people did, and visitor use went way down. And so we're analyzing photos right now along this trail system to see what happened with animal behavior in response to suddenly removing all the humans from the system and then now putting them back in. So we don't have anything to say preliminary yet. It's still under analysis, but we're excited to see, do they go from nocturnal to moving around during the day? Do they use trails more or less? Those kinds of questions we're hoping to get out of that data. So that should be pretty cool. So those are a couple of our long-term monitoring projects. So research themes. These aren't research themes I necessarily put together. They're ones that they seem to be gelling over my couple of years here so far at Wild Basin. I would say all of them revolve around these three things: education, research, and management, right? We're trying to hit that center spot. So we're educating, we're getting students experiences, but we're also contributing to management locally through data-driven research. So I'm going to talk about these three themes: acoustic ecology, thermal ecology, and technology for a few minutes. Acoustic ecology. So the first grant we got at Wild Basin was through the I4 Institute, which was funded through the NSF, so it was a sub-award at St. Edwards, to measure the soundscape of Wild Basin. So we're those 15 long-term ecological sites. Now each of those sites has an acoustic monitor on a tree at the center of that site. So this is one of those, for example, right here, right? 15 sites. They've been up now for about a year and a half. Actually captured part of COVID as well, part of that shutdown as well, which will be interesting to look at. So there's the 15 sites again, but this summer, this student right here, Sam Stone, he didn't just ban birds all summer, but he got to do a little bit of that. He went to 132 different sites across Wild Basin to get 24 hours of recording at each of those locations, all right? So the goal with this project is to build a map of the soundscape of Wild Basin. What does Wild Basin look like? Right? You might think about the road being noisy. It's going to change the soundscape there. But we're also interested in microhabitats, acoustic microhabitats. Because I can tell you just from walking around there, you can be right next to the road, get way down into a ravine there, and it's pretty quiet. Right? So what does it look like? And then the goal will be to start overlaying animal populations on top of that. Say, are they selecting for these particular habitats in Wild Basin? So this is an acoustic map that's put together by the National Park Service for the entirety of the United States, which is awesome. But we want to build one of those for Wild Basin that's really detailed. That's the goal. We have a little bit of data. So you can see the 15 locations are in blue. And last year, we also went and we took acoustic samples in the 3 golden cheek warbler nesting sites we had on the property to ask the question, are they using sites that are quieter than Wild Basin as a whole? This shows you every recorder, but if you actually were to get an average of all the sites at Wild Basin on that grid, and then look at that comparison to the golden cheek warbler sites, the warbler sites are quieter. So there's a number of things that could be driving that. I can't say it's just noise, right? It could also be that they're further from the road. There could be other things about those microhabitats that might be selected, but nonetheless, we see the golden cheek warblers like the quieter sites, right? Gives us reason to try to keep Wild Basin as quiet as we can. The student at Dead was the one who went out and did all this recording and put this data together. And COVID again. So we also went out, when COVID shut everything down, I was considered, what do they call it, required personnel or whatever. And basically I could go out once a week to Wild Basin to monitor, just to keep from homeless encampments on the trail or whatever, I guess, that kind of thing. But of course I took an acoustic recorder with me because heck, I want to do research while I'm out there. So I walked out there and I got recordings of all these different locations. This, by the way, is Highway 360 that runs next to Wild Basin. This is during the shutdown. You never see 360 like this, all right? It is bumper to bumper traffic all day long. So it was shocking to get these videos. So I got 1-minute videos every week in 2020. And then the student that I just showed you today repeated everything this year in 2021, right? So the videos, I don't have a video there, but you can see a lot more use of the highway. But you can also see here noise level in 2020, much quieter than 2021. Maybe that's not shocking, but nonetheless, we're able to show that, right? That's what research often does. The other thing, look at this. This is called acoustic complexity index. Think of like one sound is not very complex. Lots of sounds, you know, high sounds, low sounds, short sounds, long sounds, that's complex, right? Acoustic complexity was much higher in 2020 than it was in 2021. So it's probably driving that, again, is that road noise. It may not be that birds weren't singing as much in 2021, but you couldn't hear them as much, right? You heard this low frequency drone of the road, whereas in 2020, it was quiet. You heard all kinds of different things, birds, insects, frogs, all that kind of stuff. So this was kind of cool to confirm that, in fact, it had an impact, at least on what you could hear out there at Wild Basin. All right, so far I've talked about anthropogenic or ambient noise that's coming into the preserve. Recently, we got kind of excited about looking at gilded-cheeked warbler sounds as well. So some of the Austin biologists came up to me and they said, you know what's weird? The gilded-cheeked warblers this year sound different than they used to. All right, cool. Let's take a look at it. So it turns out they had a bunch of recordings from 2008. And so we went out and got a bunch of recordings this year in 2021, and we just looked at it. It's early on, everything's early on right now at Wild Basin. So this is just a couple of pictures. I wouldn't take too much away from it. But on the other hand, if you look at those calls from 2021, or songs, I should say, and 2008, do they look different to you?
Yeah.
They look pretty different. And they sound different out there too. The 2008 is much buzzier. The newer ones, if you will, are much more tonal. Sound a little more like a Buick Saran, if you know what a Buick Saran sounds like. So we're actually we've got a pretty large data set now to do a statistical comparison of these different years to see if we got change over time, which would be kind of interesting to see if that's happening. It probably means that, actually I can't say what it probably means, something's driving it, right? Is it other things in their environment? Is it that populations are moving in space? Because we do know there are regional dialects, birds sing different in different places. Are we getting a new regional dialect? Don't know. We're early on, but still, it's interesting stuff. So City of Boston, VCP is working with us. University of Texas is also doing some analysis of gilded-cheeked warbler songs that we're collaborating on as well. All right, that's acoustic ecology. Let's talk a little about thermal ecology. So we got another I-4 grant through St. Edward's. This is two professors at St. Edward's, Elijah Wolschel, who is a herpetologist, and Matt Steffensen, who is an entomologist. And he'd probably be mad at me because he mostly studies bees. So for me to put a butterfly up there is probably, yeah, he wouldn't appreciate it. I was trying to think of what I would compare it to, but anyways, he would want to be. So anyway, these guys got a grant. We're looking at ectotherms, right? Because these are all ectotherms. And then what's the effect of the thermal environment on distributions of ectotherms at Wild Basin? So I'm in charge of the thermal piece. These guys are the experts on the ectotherms. So I actually solicited some help and reached out to some other people on the thermal piece. And last week, we had two professors, Evan and Ashley Tanner, come to Wild Basin from Texas A&M University, Kingsville, to install what's called a TWS thermal system. And it's basically a little tiny cable. And that cable runs from our visitor center all the way down through a ravine and up the other side of the hill towards that Vireo preserve. It gives you continuous temperature measurements along that cable. You can program it to every meter, every centimeter, every minute, however much you want to sample it, all right? So you get these really fine detail measurements of temperature. So here's the cable. And this, I should point out, this is Nikki. Nikki Lake is our land manager. If you come out and do a project on Saturday, you will meet Nikki Lake. She's awesome. So the goal with this is to get something that looks like this. This is a graphic that Evan kind of put together in a presentation he made from a different location, but you can see what does it look like under canopy? What does it look like in open areas? Our hope is to look at juniper or cedar, right? Whatever you want to call it, ash juniper, in comparison to oak, and in comparison to these little openings that we have at wild basins. So what's the value of tree cover and different types of tree cover for the thermal environment? I'm super excited because we also got another professor from Kingsville that's going to come fly a thermal drone. So I've done a little bit of drone work in the past, searching for bird nests and so on using thermal cameras. But this guy has got much better drones than I do. And he's going to come out and he's going to fly drones, which will be really cool because we'll have ground temperature, we'll have air temperature at the same time. So what is it like from below? What is it like from above? And then putting that together with LiDAR that's been taken over the entire wild basin, we should be able to map the thermal soundscape, landscape, excuse me, of the whole preserve, which I'm super excited about. So why? Well, this is ideas of what may happen to our climate in the future, right? So what's the distribution of these organisms now? What might happen? We can start to model what might we lose, what might we gain in the way of critters over time as climate changes, as climate warms. What's the value of ash juniper as a microhabitat, a thermal microhabitat at wild basin and in central Texas more generally, right? I know that's a controversial tree. Some love it, some people hate it. But what's the value for that on the thermal scene? Oh, yeah, speaking of thermal. So we had this event last winter, right? Yeah. We didn't have any of the big equipment out yet, but if you look closely at those recorders that I put out, there's this little button hanging right below it. That's an I button. So it actually records temperature and humidity. I had them recording every 10 minutes. And I made one of these blunders that happens. And I thought every 10 minutes should last 3 or 4 months. And then I went out and realized that every 10 minutes lasted 1 month. But unfortunately, I checked 3 months later. So I lost a whole bunch of data. It happens, right? But I was excited because one of them at least captured the entirety of that storm event. So those are all the temperature readings in wild basin on 10-second intervals over that storm event. You can see it's in Celsius, right? But here's 0 degrees. So we got these normal days here in the 70s or so, and then boom, just drops off. I wish I had all 15 locations because then I could look at the different spots and see what happened in different spots. But, oh well. All right. Questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
See, so you mentioned the juniper, the cover, as you know, and maybe some people know, the cover of juniper has gone up dramatically in this region over the last 100 years, 150 years. Some places, including the ranch that we have as part of the school, we do a lot of brush clearing, cutting that out, because bringing it back to more of an oak savanna. Do you do any of that, or do you love your brush? Your brush as in the juniper doesn't provide cover for others.
Yeah, not at wild basin. We don't do any clearing at wild basin, so it's all it's pretty thick in a lot of places at wild basin. Yeah. One of the part 2 goals of this cable is to take it and run it off the ground. We're gonna run it along the ground like you saw, but then run it off the ground in the tree canopy coming back, and actually make comparisons to the canopy and the ground. Because there's some theories out there because of transpiration, the albedo of the trees is higher and makes it warmer in the tree canopy than it is in open air next to it. So it may be cooler on the ground in the shade, but it's actually warmer in the trees. If you like birds, like I do, then you start to think about that as far as management goes.
Yeah,
So,
actually, this next Tuesday, I'm giving my lecture on cover in class, so it's interesting you say that. And you make a good point. If temperatures are going up the next 100 years, invasive, it's a native species, so invasive juniper is maybe providing a benefit in terms of cover for temperature.
So we're gonna do insect surveys along that line and really see, because insects have pretty small ranges. So we're gonna see if we get differences in those open and closed areas. If juniper is protecting the higher diversity or abundance of insects. So hopefully we'll have some of that data by the end of the year. Other questions?
So some of the noise aspect of it, you're only researching how it affects birds and like golden chick warblers?
So it's really, right now, it's general. We want to get just a picture of what noise is like in a wild basin. And then we can start to overlay anything we want on there. So birds is one, I've studied birds, and we did that a little bit. I've looked at the effect of noise on birds quite a bit. But certainly insects are using a lot of noise cues as well. So that we want to be fun to overlay. And then you can honestly think of mammals and other things as well, because they have larger home ranges often, which makes it harder to detect. But they're often rely on noise for prey.
Oh, I was just thinking of like the difference between day and night and the nocturnal versus daytime.
Yeah, so there's been some studies with things like owls at night. There seems to still be noise impacts at night, but you're right, it's often much quieter even in an urban area at night. The goal is to have a map that will have sliders on it, where you can slide for season, you can slide for time of day and all that stuff, and you would be able to say, what is it like, noon, during rush hour, at midnight, and get a picture of all of that. So hopefully I can come back and show you all that map sometime. It's complex, but I'm excited about it.
Sorry, did you have a recording of the difference in the songs for the golden chicks?
Do we have a recording?
Yeah, the 2008.
Oh, to play? I don't. I should have thought of that, but I don't have one with me. I may be able to email some to you if you want to listen to the meeting or something like that.
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, I can do that.
Maybe said this, but where are you getting all this money? It's probably, you mentioned like an I-4?
Some of it's from an I-4, which is a big grant, that NSF grant that St. Edward's got.
The NSF grant?
It is, yeah, and then they give sub-awards for that. And some of it's in collaboration with some bigger universities, and they bring some money with them, which is nice. Yeah. Yes.
Do you communicate a lot of this research to the community? Or do you mostly do research papers and disseminate it to the scientific community?
And that's a great question. So one of my goals is to do more research or more community, to transfer to the community. And I think we're in a good spot to do that, because Austin is owned the preserve next door. We're 2/3 owned by Travis County. Right, so we're already kind of set in this place where people want to know what's happening on their landscape. So that's one of my goals. I mean, I do want to do publish papers, do presentations, and get it out to the scientific community as well. But I want to make the local community very much part of it.
I mean, even just the sounds that you're talking about, you could have a display like for the public to just say, this is what it sounds like here at this time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of,
Absolutely, you're right. Yeah, there's a lot of educational programs that can go around that and so on. Yeah, that is one of our goals, and I'm working with some students on that right now. In fact, some of them I've told, work more on a, what do you say, not PR, but like something for the public rather than a paper, right? So those are good avenues. Other questions? Okay, technology. So, do anyone know what this is? It's an Arduino microcomputer. Maybe you've heard of them, or Raspberry Pi is also similar. They're not very popular. So this is something that we've used in the field a few times. It just seems like technology is creeping in a good way, I think, to a lot of ecological research right now. So we're trying to embrace some of that. So one of the projects we did this summer was not at Wild Basin. Got a little bit in trouble for that. It was at Bracken Cave, not too far from here. But professor at Trinity, Troy Murphy, runs a series of boxes out there where he's got black-crested titmice that are nesting. And so we had these little chips that you can put on a bird leg, and then a reader you put in the box, and you can tell when a bird visits the box, and it has an ID. It's like, running race chips. You can tell which bird it was. So we put chips on all the nestlings in the box, and then we weighed them, and we wanted to see who comes out first. Does weight matter, or mass? Does mass matter for when they fledge? I predicted the heaviest would come out first, because I thought that'll be the most fit individual, the most ready to go out into the big world, and they're coming out first. I was absolutely wrong. It was the opposite. We did see a pattern, but it was the lightest bird that came out first. Now, we can only put forth hypotheses about why this might be, but some of them put a pretty interesting idea forth. Any ideas from y'all? Why would the lightest bird come out first?
Could the heavier ones maybe be sticking around longer to eat more, because they kind of, I don't know, maybe they have some sort of like genetic thing that they're trying to build up more before they go out, and the lighter ones they're not getting enough food in the nest anyway, so like I might as well find my luck outside.
Exactly. That's what the researchers have put forth, is that it was kind of, hey, I'm heavy, I'm doing good, mom and dad are feeding me well, I'm not going anywhere, versus I'm really struggling to get food in the box, I'm getting out. Let me get in that big world, right? We'll see. But it's kind of cool. It surprised me. It was the opposite of what I expected. But nonetheless, it was a lot of fun to do that using some technology to come up with. Yeah.
Would it be too that birds need to fly, and in order to fly, you need to be light? So the lighter ones will take off a lot sooner than the heavier ones. And who's to say that the heavier ones struggle to fly? So why take a chance, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it could be that too. So birds, the studies I've done with fledglings, what's interesting is they tend to, they put on weight, and then they stop putting on weight, and but they get bigger. So they actually get lighter for their weight, right? So it's almost like they put on a bunch of mass, and then they kind of trim down and get ready for flying. So it's kind of like what you're talking about. So yeah, it's possible that could be the case too. Yeah.
It goes from baby fat to like muscle, you said.
It's kind of, yeah, that's a pretty good analogy of what's happening, right? You just put on a whole bunch of baby fat to survive, right? And then you got to prepare to fly. So they don't actually usually lose weight, but they'll get bigger and they won't gain much weight, is what happens. They're trimming down. All right, so this is a brand new one. I don't even know where this one's going to go yet, but we had some proposals put forth to make Wild Basin wireless. So essentially, that's not so you can log on and check your email while you're on Wild Basin, but it's a sensor network, right? So you have this network of sensors. They're always taking temperature, taking humidity. We've looked into water quality measurements, soil moisture, those kinds of things. We're also excited about the idea of MODIS. MODIS is a bird tracking system where you can track birds that have been banned that are migrating through, but then update this in real time to managers at Wild Basin. Some have talked about the fire department if you're managing temperatures and things like that, right? So this is something that's, fingers crossed, up and coming at Wild Basin. It's just a couple months in building, but we're hopeful that we can get something going. So this is going to be pretty novel as far as technology goes if we can really build this, but it is one of our goals. All right, so there's some of my awesome crew, all undergrads at St. Edward's. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about my research trajectory, which is similar, but a little bit different. If you take these three, education, research, and management, I'm just going to shift them a little bit to conservation, management, and behavior. Those are sort of the three that I'm trying to put together. Now, before I do, does anyone have any other questions? Okay, so I'm a bird nerd. I'm not going to, trying to say I'm not, I love them. And a lot of the research I'm going to show you here was done in Michigan, since I've only been here for a couple of years, still getting things off the ground. So this is stuff I did at Calvin while I was in Michigan. One thing I should also note, 95% of the authors that you see on papers, the people that did this research, were all undergrads. So one of the things I really love to do is get undergrads involved in really sweet research that you can actually go out and you can present and publish. And so something to think about for you. I'm guessing a lot of you are undergrads. Certainly take hold of opportunities as an undergrad. You don't need to wait to be a graduate student to do really awesome research and make contributions to science. So let's talk about some of these things that we did. Songbirds, one of the things that's unfortunate about songbirds is that they're declining, right? A lot of things are declining. This paper really showed, 2019, what some of these declines, the magnitude of some of these declines that we're seeing in songbirds, they're pretty substantial. So this kind of drives us to think about what do we do about it. And one of the grand problems that I've studied has been the problem of noise. We've mentioned that a little bit already in acoustic ecology, this idea that noise impacts birds. Now, I don't know if I have sound. I have a little bit of noise here. Let's see if it plays. I don't think I have sound. It's on my laptop. You might hear a little bit the way back. If this was playing through the system, this is really loud. So this is a forest in Michigan. It's a great forest. It looks really nice. If you were just to look at that as habitat, it's good. But if you were to know more about it, it's next to a highway and it's really loud, right? So is noise contributing to lower densities, lower species richness that we see of birds in those areas? I showed you this map earlier. It's a map of noise in the United States. Basically, there's a lot of noise. You see where you are? I can certainly see Austin on the map. I can see San Antonio. In fact, I can see I-35 going between the two, right? It's pretty noisy. So noise is kind of a big deal because there's kind of a lot of it. if you think about our country. So way back in my PhD, I started to look at noise and noise impacts on birds. This was in Alberta, Canada, and what we found is that species richness went down as noise increased. Species richness simply being the number of species that you find, right? We looked at a couple of species in depth, and we also found that abundance went down. So, do you have any birders in the crowd who want to take a guess at what these are? It's a nuthatch, red-breasted nuthatch. This is a tough one. It's the least flycatcher. Someone said flycatcher, you're right, it's a flycatcher, the least flycatcher. And then this is a western tanager. It's a western tanager. I don't think you can see that outside here too. But all of these decreased as noise went up. So you're less likely to find them as it got louder, right? So we suggested that noise was having an impact on birds. This is a study I did with a student at Calvin where we went out, we put up some acoustic recorders. They had 2 microphones on them. We recorded the dawn chorus, but on one microphone, we used one of those nice little Apple earbuds, and we put it on one microphone and we played noise. So we masked it or potentially masked it a little bit. Well, this is the result right here. So 40, 50, 60, 70 decibels, so getting louder. This is pretty quiet. This is not highway level noise, but you definitely know something's going on. But this is sort of a control. The sloped line is because one of the things we could have done a little better is we did our playbacks always in order. So as the morning progressed, birds sang less, right? Dawn chorus started to go down. So that's what happened here. This was the dawn chorus starting to drop off on our control. That's why that's a little bit sloped. But in comparison, when you add noise to it, look at this. This is what you heard. This is the number of birds you heard. This is the number you heard in control, right? Way down. So noise is simply masking bird calls. They just can't hear each other in a lot of locations. Here's what's interesting though. Roads, one of the biggest producers of noise in the United States, birds seem to be impacted up to 1 kilometer away from a road. Now, if you ever stood 1 kilometer away from a road, it's not that loud, right? If you're right next to the highway, it's loud. Don't hang out there. But 1 kilometer away, not too bad. So we suggested that we have this acoustic masking zone near the highway where you don't want to be because you can't hear each other, right? But then this noise effect, reduced bird numbers exist way out here to 1 kilometer. And the question is, why out here? What's going on out here? The noise is pretty quiet. They should be able to hear each other. What's happening out here? And this is what we started to investigate in a lot of experiments that we did at Calvin. So what we suggested was that maybe something like fear or novelty was driving their reductions more distant from roads, right? It's like, what is this? I don't know what this is. Let's stay away. But to understand that a little better, I want to introduce you to cue response systems, all right? So here we have signals and cues. They lead to responses, but then those responses lead to a particular outcome. That's a process of learning, essentially. Let me give you an example. Whoops. That is my example, but that was a little bit, I went too fast. Bacon, right? So bacon probably brings up a lot of response, some positive, some negative, right? Depending on how you feel about bacon. But let's envision it's something that you really like at this point in time, right? So you have a smell of bacon. So you just have the smell. The smell of bacon, if you love bacon, the response will probably be, I'm gonna go towards that smell. I'm gonna do what I can to get that bacon, right? And that was my next picture, which now it doesn't want to come up. There it is, right? Sorry if I'm grossing some people out. So you went out and you got your bacon. Now, if that worked out for you, hey, you're happy, right? The outcome was good. It reinforced that cue response system. So you do that over and over and over, and it always works out. And it kind of becomes a habit, right? Of course, this is a silly example. It becomes a habit. So let's imagine now this is a learned response. So you see, did you see the big shift there? There it goes. There it is. Response to learned response, right? Now you've learned this. This is what I do. All right. So you went for bacon all the time. Problem is, there are these cars out there that run off like McDonald's grease and they smell like bacon, right? So in this silly example, if you always went to the smell of bacon, then sometimes you end up with a mouthful of exhaust because you went to the wrong thing, right? Now your system is broken and we're no longer happy, all right? This is what we call an evolutionary mismatch, where you have a learned behavior that's been developed over time or repetition with the same outcome, and now that outcome has shifted, right? It's changed, and the system is no longer functioning like it should be. So let's think about noise. We got noise in the past. So a bird flies in and it's noisy, a lot of migratory, right? So it's flying back from migration, so it's noisy. If you don't normally nest near rivers, let's say, or in big open fields where it's noisy, you probably want to stay away from that because maybe there's competitors there that you're not used to. Maybe it's not a good food source for you. Maybe you can't communicate. But regardless, your response will be avoid. Your outcome will be that, yeah, you should avoid it. So it reinforces that, okay? Now, let's take that noise and let's change it to anthropogenic noise. So I guess I should say previously that would be water noise, wind noise, things like that, right? Noise has been around for a long time. But now let's make that anthropogenic noise. We have that learned response, but maybe the habitat is actually pretty good, right? Maybe there isn't a whole lot of competitors here. Maybe the food sources are pretty good. So is it fear? Is it novelty? Maybe some of those other things are keeping you out, right? If that's true, we have a mismatch. And if that's true, is there something we can do to solve that mismatch? Well, ideally we would do this, right? We'd have these new cars that don't drive on roads and they float around, they make no noise, and the world will be perfect and we'll all be happy. But that's unfortunately not happening just yet. So here's our idea. We've tried to start using birdsong. So birds use song for a lot of things. Territory defense is one, the main one. Attracting mates is another. Alarm, flock cohesion. They can actually identify each other with their songs, which is pretty fascinating. Sometimes people can too. So let me play for you, I don't really hear it very well, but let me play for you an example of a territory defense song. Turn my computer as best I can. So I'm sure you've all heard that at points during the dawn chorus in the morning. Now I'll play you one where these birds are attracting mates. Man, if behavioral ecology was that easy. All right, so those are the primary functions of bird songs, but there's another one that they use as well, and that's conspecific attraction. People like to be with people, birds like to be with birds. That's the idea that when they settle, they often settle in areas near other birds. And then one of the cues they use to settle that area is song, right? So if they fly in and they hear song, they're more likely to settle in that area. One of the early studies of this was done with black-capped vireos here in Central Texas, where they played song in young habitat. No black-capped vireos were settling. They got some like 72 pairs after they put speakers in the habitat with black-capped vireo songs. So they're obviously paying attention to these songs, which is really cool. So that's the idea of conspecific attraction, and then you're attracting conspecific playback. You're playing back their songs. So we thought, well, let's see if we can do this in some of these areas farther from roads to help reopen these areas for birds. We called it Redemption Song because we thought that was cool. And also because I don't know if anyone remembers Bob Marley, but he's got a cool song called Redemption Song. So we thought it was pretty good. So here's what we did. This is in northern Michigan. We put out speakers, we played that songs, we did it in a bunch of different locations, and then we measured bird territories in those locations. We did it at 4 different spots, progressively further away from the speaker, and then we had a control location where we didn't have a speaker, and then playback ones where we did, obviously. Now all the speakers were near an opening in a pretty forested area where you expect probably have fewer birds. If you look at control, which is the blank bars here, you had that. So at location 1, there were lower densities than at 2, 3, and 4. But where we played back our songs, we actually had higher densities than any of the other locations. So this showed that that conspecific attraction was working. And in our case, we played 6 different species. So not just one, like the black-capped vireo, we had 6, and it worked for most of them, which was kind of cool because like, man, maybe we can shift a whole community. We can bring a whole community of birds in to these locations. So next step, this is out in the middle of nowhere. Now we took it near roads. So we started to do surveys near roads. We put our speakers near roads. These were low use roads. We didn't want highway level sounds. right? So relatively quiet, but still rows nonetheless. We did the same thing, and we found out that in our experimental sites, we had a lot more birds settled than in our control sites. When you add that row to the mix, they were still coming, right? They're still coming, they're still responding to those songs, which was pretty cool. We thought, hey, we can actually move birds into these areas. Now, there's a big danger. I know a lot of y'all have a background in this. You probably may already be thinking this, some of you. What if you're moving in, you're killing, right? We create what we call a sink, where they're coming in and they're not reproducing, so you're actually doing a disservice to the birds. You got to figure out, are they reproducing when they get to those locations? Unfortunately, it was very hard, we deemed it impossible, to track reproduction in the sites where we had been doing the playbacks. We had to move to a couple of different systems to look at reproduction. One we did was bluebirds. And this was a bluebird system. The nice thing was they're in boxes. You could monitor the birds. What we did is we looked at adult behavior using those RFID bands, so you could monitor how often they came to the box. We could monitor fledglings. We looked at fledgling mass and their growth over time. And then we also had, of course, controls and playbacks where we made noisy or quiet. So here's what we found when we did that. In noisy locations, adult birds fed to fledglings more than control birds when they were young. But it switched at about day 11. So that's this right here. So right, these are noise birds, feed them more and then suddenly feed them less. All right, now look at the mass of the young birds in comparison. The noise birds, earlier on, their mass is higher, which is kind of cool to see, like, well, I guess they're eating more. But then at the end, it leveled out, right? And they fledged about the same mass. So what we thought was fascinating about this was here we saw adult behavior was shifted in response to the noise in order to create ultimately a similar outcome for the fledglings, right? So they fledged about the same condition, but the adults behaved differently to get there. So again, this was suggesting to us that maybe reproduction can be okay in noise, at least for some species. This is bluebirds, right? Bluebirds are in a lot of human areas. So we stepped up our game a little bit and we tried to do it on a big scale. We looked at birds banded at 1,400 banding stations across the United States with this program called MAPS. And we looked at noise level at those stations. And then we looked to see whether abundance went up or down based on noise level and whether reproduction up and down, or productivity based on noise level, right? Now, the thing was, if abundance goes down, which we've documented in many cases with noise, and reproduction goes down at the same time, you probably don't want to bring it back in there, right? Because abundance predicts bad reproduction. In that case, our dots all would have been over here. But if they're in all four quadrants, which are mixed together, and that suggests that it's not tightly correlated, and maybe sometimes you could bring birds back and they might reproduce okay. And that's what we saw. You zoom into that quadrant right there, because they're kind of all over the place, right? It was not a significant pattern to say that lower abundance always predicts lower reproduction. So we thought that was pretty cool. We're not going to go start putting speakers by all the roads just yet. We're probably a long ways off from doing that. But it's always science is step by step, right? It's a slow process, but nonetheless, you're making progress, hopefully, towards solutions. Now, I know I'm going a little long. I have a few more slides. Can you hang in there for a few more minutes? Okay, all right. So if I look at this a little bit more, we talk about birds, we talk about this noise effect, we talk about reducing fear, right? That's what I've been talking about so far. Let's reduce this fear and get them to come back, right? There might be some places where we want to induce fear or make animals afraid of roads, because of course we know that animals get hit by cars on roads a lot. It's bad for animals, and it can also be obviously bad for humans, right? So there's a lot of damage and injuries associated with that. So if you're tired of me listening about birds, I have a couple of non-bird thoughts for you. About deer. Is there anything we could do with deer, right? Deer is a huge issue at roads. Is there anything we could do using behavioral principles to help induce fear or keep deer away from roads? So I'll show you one study that gives you some ideas. This study was really looking at hunting. It was looking at the goal was not necessarily to look at deer and roads, but Here's hunting season, here's non-hunting season. Look at the distances the deer are from the roads during the 2 seasons. Hunting season, non-hunting season. So during hunting season, deer stay away from roads, right? They stay further away from roads. There's actually some documentation of lower deer mortality on roads during hunting season. Why is that? Any ideas?
More likely to get killed by a road during hunting season. Hunters don't want to walk that far off a beaten path.
Because that's where the hunters are, yeah, right? The hunters are looking, but they're not necessarily at the roads, but you know what they are at? They're usually at openings. They're usually in forest openings. And roads with right-of-ways usually have forest openings, right? So the deer learn to stay more within thick cover during hunting season and therefore avoid roads, right? Put it out there, it'd be an interesting idea to pursue a little bit further. You also, if you're a hunter, know that when you see this, it's bad news, right? Because if one deer learns the behavior, the other deer do the same thing, right? This is an alarm signal, they're all out of there. So maybe if you start to train a few and you get learning animal to animal, you could actually change population dynamics. Oh yeah, there's a bridge, right? The map's got a bridge in it. Because these guys have to cross roads a lot of times, right? So they may live most of their life in uplands, but they got to get down to a pond in order to breed. A lot of times they put roads in between those areas. So the same question would be, can we do something to help them to use bridges, overpasses, safe areas? Can we use smell? Can we use chemicals, something like that, to start shifting behavioral patterns of movement in these animals to use particular areas to get around roads? All right. So that is a bulk of some of what I've done. I've done some other research I won't get into here. We've looked at drones as a tool for wildlife. I'd be happy to talk with you all about that if you're interested. Done a lot of bird banding. It's a lot of fun. And you get some really cool answers out of that. So we'll stop there. I'm excited because supposedly any day now, they're coming out with a book that I edited on songbird behavior and conservation. So some of these themes that I've talked about, we actually put into a book that we're gonna get published. So I've told people this a couple of times. I've given talks. If you want to follow me here, you can find out when the book comes out. But that's about the only thing you'll find out because I am completely useless on Twitter for anything else. Even though it sounds like a bird theme, I don't do anything on Twitter. Anyways, that's all I have. Thank you very much for having me on.
You want to take questions?
Yeah, I can take questions.
We have 10 minutes for questions. If anyone has any lingering questions.
Yeah, so I know that a lot of highways have like soft barriers, like walls. How would that, do we know how that would affect noise and the likelihood that an animal will cross the road?
Yeah, so there is a noise reduction from those walls. They tend to be put by turbines because it creates every 6 decibels of increase is actually a cooling in sound level because noise is made on a logarithmic scale. But it'll take about 6 decibels off, so it'll cut the noise in half. So if you're in a neighborhood, you're probably really happy about that. If you're a bird, it might help. The challenge has been it's expensive. So you want to put that along a huge stretch of highway, it's overly expensive. What's that? Well, the other thing is that, yeah, you actually can create some more issues for turtles or deer that they get into the roadway and then they can't get out. So there can be other things associated with it. So those are good sort of small scale solutions, but I haven't yet seen how you do it in large scale. Oh, we thought about that. Noise canceling speakers along a highway. Problem is noise varies so much. Yeah.
Do you kind of, like personally, do you feel like there is more that you got out of like teaching and staff teaching than you did staff like behind the scenes, that you feel like make just as much of an impact like in the society?
That's a great question. So I'm 2 years out of doing a whole lot of teaching, right?